Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the playing of the national anthem and the reading of the invocation.
Please remain standing as I read the invocation. So as we come together, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who've served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. Please be seated. So tonight for our special council meeting, dealing with the budget, we have staff supporting us, Tanya Daniel, City Clerk, with the assistance from Melanie Figueredo. So Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councillor Weaver?
Present.
Councillor Vanderstelt?
Present.
Councillor Utley?
Present.
Councillor Slass?
Present.
Councillor McCreary?
Here.
Councillor Martin?
Here.
Councillor Carpenter?
Here.
Councillor Antosky?
Here.
Councillor Van Tilborg?
Present.
Councillor Wall?
Present.
And Mayor Davis.
Present. So I have to, of course, as we do every one of our virtual meetings, remind viewers and council that we do have some rules to make sure we operate as efficiently as possible in a virtual format. All members, please remain muted during the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for members shall remain turned on so that you count towards quorum. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need arise to answer questions from members of council. Any member of council should indicate they wish to speak by pushing the raised hand button on the participant list screen, the bottom right-hand corner. Clerk staff will lower your hand. In the event a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum, we'll recess for up to 15 minutes to reestablish quorum. If we're not successful, the meeting will automatically be adjourned. All members of council participating via online video conference will vote using eScribe, and the clerk will then announce the voting results. Members of the public who've registered as delegates will take part electronically via webcam or via the telephone for the meetings. Otherwise, all the rules that apply to delegations under our procedural rules apply. So, as I said, we're here tonight to make some final decisions and acceptance of the 2021 budget that we've been working on for the last several weeks under the direction and guidance of our Budget Estimates Committee Chair, Councillor Carpenter. Now we're elevating it to council for final decision making. Now, I understand in terms of declarations of conflict of interest, Councillor Martin, I understand you have a conflict on 11C8, which is the annualized shelter bed increase at Rosewood House. Can you please confirm your conflict and state its nature?
Thank you. Yes, I'm a member of the Rosewood Board, so there's a perceived conflict there. I'm stating that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a conflict that they need to make regarding any item that we're dealing with tonight? Raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands. So we have, in terms of presentation delegations, we have no delegation or individual that's registered to speak to the item we're dealing with this evening. So we'll move right into committee reports. And as I indicated previously, the reason for this special council meeting is to approve our 2021 operating budget and associated recommendations. And of course, there could be some amendments coming out tonight. But Councillor Carpenter, understand as the chair of the Estimates Committee, you have the motion to get this approval on the floor. Could you please state your seconder and read the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My seconder is my ward mate, Councillor Cheryl Antosky, and it's moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Cheryl Antosky, that the 2021 operating budget as amended be approved and that the necessary bylaw to set the 2021 fees and charges be presented to City Council for adoption.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. I'm going to deviate from my normal procedure. Normally, I call for people to speak generally to the budget, the item that is on the floor, but I do believe we have a number of amendments. I think it's appropriate we deal with the amendments first and then have a general discussion on the budget as amended if it is. And there is some new information coming to us from staff. It has to do with the funding for Rosewood House that actually, Councillor Martin, you declared a conflict on, and which may well lead to the introduction of amendments. So I'd ask staff, in particular, I believe Mary Ellen Cullen, I believe you've got an update for us in respect to that unmet need and the impact some provincial funding that was announced, I think late last week, rather unexpectedly, might have in that budget item.
Good evening, through you, Mr. Mayor. We did come forward with an unmet need, as we're aware, to keep the Rosewood shelter beds at 40, and that was at an increased cost of $159,250. So this was an unmet need we had initially come forward with. Well, it was deemed to be extremely urgent, and that any reduction in those shelter beds would now be deemed as a bed deficit and would certainly contribute to a rise in our unsheltered homeless individuals. On March the 10th, just a short while ago, we received some exciting news from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing around the third phase of Ontario Social Services Relief Funding. So the City of Brantford will receive an additional allocation for this funding of $2,234,144. This money is to mitigate the continued impact of a COVID-19 pandemic on the homeless sector, and is for operating expenses only and does not include capital. We're required to have an implementation plan into the ministry very quickly. Actually, by the 22nd of March, the investment plan, I do apologize, must be into the ministry. And we have been working hard on that investment plan. One of the items that we are recommending is to pull back on the unmet need for this year and enhance the shelter bed capacity at Rosewood House Emergency Shelter with those 10 extra beds through this particular allocation. So we would what that would result in is essentially coming forward next year, should the need arise for those 10 additional beds in the 2022 year. That being said, we have a number of things that are happening between now and next year. We have a diversion strategy in place that we hope to see will actually result in less shelter bed requirements. We have certainly 17 homeless individuals who have been housed at Marlene Ave, and we hope to see a number of individuals housed in our new build up to 26 units. So we would be in a better position in the 2022 year to be able to identify what our unmet need would be at that time, if it was at all required. But for this year, we are able to apply the $159,250 out of the Social Services Relief Fund Phase 3 funding.
Tanya, if you might be able, we talked about this afternoon. If there was an amendment a member was considering making, which I can't make because I'm in the chair, what would the wording be? Do you have any wording for us that might help us? That's up there on the shared screen. So is there any appetite to consider this? Does anybody wish to move this amendment? I believe Councillor Vanderstelt, you're moving it, and Councillor Weaver, I think your physically hand up indicating that you're seconding it and you're nodding your heads. Okay. So, Councillor Curry, I see your hand up. I believe you have some further amendments you'd like to make, so we'll get to those. Does anybody wish to speak to this? Councillor Weaver, I think, did.
No, Mr. Mayor, I was just wishing to move the item for amendment.
Right.
That's fine.
Councillor Celeste, then Councillor McCreary to this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, through you to Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, what was the total grant for operating? 2 million something?
Yes, it's through you, Mr. Mayor. 2,234,144.
What's the amount after we take this out? The 1 million, or it's actually 2 million something left over after we've taken care of these 10 additional beds. What is the balance being used for?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the allocations can be used for a number of items: emergency shelter solutions, homelessness prevention, rent relief, and rent bank type issues, which is strongly recommended by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing related supports and services and supports. We are currently in the process of developing this investment plan, and we've identified a number of other initiatives. We are going to recommend providing hotel and motel capacity for emergency sheltering, and perhaps defer the monies in our base budget for 2021. Also, sheltering costs for Kaori Manor in the amount of $60,000, or sorry, $219,000 for Kaori Manor. And again, that is part of our base budget, and we would defer those costs as well. We would recommend the creation and operation of a rent bank program. This would be very much afforded some opportunity for those higher, lower to mid income households who are experiencing some distress right now because of COVID. This rent bank program could be a payback program, which would result in a revolving fund, which would basically make this rent bank available in perpetuity, assuming the money came back. There are similar models within the province of rent bank programs, so we are recommending that in the amount of $811,000. Enhancing the Housing Stability Fund and expanding those additional monies to those experiencing hardships right now through the Salvation Army in the amount of $325,000. We would recommend expanding the operations for the COVID Isolation Center at the Lucy Marco Building an additional 3 weeks to June 7th in the amount of $125,000. That would ensure that individuals are there and ready and available to receive those vaccines as delivery as quickly as possible. We would recommend contribution to the quarterly food security programs for the food bank for a further 3 contributions in the amount of $390,000. And we would also recommend some purchase of services through a mental health agency and a youth support agency to provide those much needed supports out in the community in the amount of $96,894. And our last item to bring us to the full $2,234,144 would be to provide supports and supplies to those clients leaving homelessness to the new city apartment facility that we have proposed at 177 Colburn Street West.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Are any of those that you've just identified areas where you're putting money, are they already in the budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of them are, yes. And we would obviously be having a surplus at the end of 2021. The hotel capacity is in the base budget, as is the money for Kaori Manor. And we would hope to be able to have those surpluses and utilize those at a later date.
Okay. Would it be possible to use those to reduce the budget this year? And if they're still required next year, I'll look for it next year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they are part of our base budget now. We couldn't, we believe that very much hotels and motels would still be required next year. The idea would be, I mean, that's something we could consider, but the idea would be that we would take those monies, they would go into a reserve to provide for homelessness type solutions in the end. Since this money is only available for operating, the intention would be that that surplus would go into a reserve and we would be able to come up with a variety of homelessness solutions with that money. But was what we were recommending.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, all these things that we're going to spend this found money on, they would come to council for approval. But you're saying you're going to recommend, they would be recommended probably through social services and then to council for approval?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is no requirement at this point to go to council. What my understanding of this process is, we must have our investment plan into the ministry by next week. So we were given very, very short timelines to be able to develop an investment plan. So we've been working on that all week. It is my understanding that it would go forward to the EOC for approval at that level. Once the ministry approves the investment plan, they would let us know that we are able to, that they would start sending the monies, and we could start allocating that funding. But unfortunately, there isn't the time to be able to come to council, and we are getting the allocation, assuming that our investment plan is acceptable to the ministry.
And so this investment plan that we put together, how long have we been working on this plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just last week.
So we just had, the province gave it a week's notice to do this. Okay, you will copy council on the plan and whether it's approved or not. And you will also give us a report on how it's spent and how it worked out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. We would be happy to come forward and write a report, a subsequent report on the intent and how it's going, and the approval process.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question about this, Mary Ellen. You may be able to answer. It might be Brian Hutchings, might be Joelle Daniels, but if I understand correctly, this recommendation was brought forward because, well, there's a very strong, let's say, possibility that the 10 extra beds, depending on what we do this year and how our plans roll out on shelter and housing, that it may not be required next year. And what you were looking for with this money that was totally kind of unexpected is expenses that we would only have this year, or expenses that would not likely be incurred or possibly incurred next year. Was that the intent in terms of making an impact on this year's budget with that money?
Yes, that was indeed the intent. We would make an impact. We would not ask for the unmet need. We would still be able to provide those 40 beds through Rosewood, those co-ed beds at Rosewood. That would give us a full year to be able to evaluate our diversion strategy and see how well that goes, as well as the builds, and we would have a better understanding of our shelter needs for the 2022 budget. And if indeed there was an unmet need at that time, we would come forward.
Excuse me, Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought it would be appropriate to thank our MPP for the funds and the province. It's very well needed, and it sounds like we have an excellent plan on how we're going to utilize that money. So I think we're all very appreciative of this funding announcement.
All right, excuse me. Not seeing any raised hands, Madam Clerk, if you would please administer the vote on this amendment.
Councillor Utley and Councillor Martin, we're just waiting for your response.
I declared a conflict on this
Oh,
because of
correct.
the-
My apologies. I will note that. My apologies for that. Councillor Utley,
I'll vote in the affirmative, please. I've got nothing on my screen.
thank you very much. I'll note that. The amendment has carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, McCurry, Carpenter, and Toski, Van Til, Borgwall. Mayor Davis noting Councillor Martin's conflict.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So we'll now move, I suspect there may be some further amendments, and Councillor McCurry, you've raised your hand a couple of times now, very early on this, so you're next.
Nothing gets by you, Mayor. Thank you very much. Councillor Martin and I are
Thank
bringing
you
an
with a big
amendment to the
yellow
floor
hand.
now. Members of committee will have had this in their inbox today. And I can say that it's comprised of 21 line items from the budget, which comes before us tonight. And these have arisen last week as a result of us running out of time last week for further questioning and movement of amendments to the budget. And I hope everybody's had an opportunity to not only look at this, but to look at the staff responses. The list began much bigger, and staff were able to clarify a lot of the items which have been taken away. Some of the suggested cuts that, or the amendments rather, that we had considered have been reduced in amount because staff have made a good case for preservation in the like amount that's before you today. I would say that, as is the case with the budget, it's always a balancing act between our meeting the needs of the taxpayer or the ratepayer or the citizen of the city versus meeting the needs of the corporation and the requirements of staff to
Point of order.
Yes,
Point of order.
yes, Councillor Carpenter.
Is there an amendment on the floor that we're speaking to?
That's a good point.
Let me clarify. Yes,
Yes.
let me clarify.
You
Sorry.
could please clarify for the benefit of the members, please,
I
Councillor.
believe, I thought everybody had it in front of them, but I should have read it, and Councillor Carpenter is quite correct.
Yeah.
The resolution reads that, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Martin, that the schedule of budget adjustments before you in the amount of increases to revenue of $22,000 and decreases to expense in the amount of $153,000 be an amendment to the budget before us today.
Great. So
and
that's seconded by, and thank you very
Councillor
much,
Martin.
Councillor Carpenter, for that. So it's seconded by Councillor Martin. And perhaps can staff, can you share this? It's a spreadsheet, I think, and that might help us.
So Mayor, are you, if I'll continue while that's happening.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what we have before us is a number of items. Some of them are not necessarily impactful on the tax rate. Some are applicable to user rates and reserves. Some would result in reductions to budget accounts, which then could go into reserves perhaps. But these are items in the budget which is before us. And although they may not have a direct tax impact, they do total $153,000 in reductions and $22,000 in increases to revenue. And I would, we brought this as a single package because some councillors may be willing to support or not support it in its entirety. Staff have done a good job on the budget to date. Others may want to pick one or two out to discuss and perhaps approve or not approve the balance, Mayor. But that's why it's before us in the format it's in. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor McCurry. So, I think probably since we've got a package in front of us and we have some supplementary information from staff that is kind of highlighted here in different colors, suggest what we do is if you have a concern about, let's say, a particular line being in this package, I think perhaps the best way to handle this would be request to amend, which I assume would be either a line item, either deleting it or changing it. I think that's probably the way to handle it. And then we can have general discussion about the package as a whole, depending on whether or not it's amended. So I've got a number of hands raised. We'll start with Councillor Weaver.
You're still muted, Councillor Weaver.
Good.
Thank you. Sorry, I turned my hand off instead of my mute button. I see that it's color coded. Could we just get another explanation of the color coding? I'm not sure I'm understanding what all the different colors mean. And are we able to maybe scroll down so we can see the legend that's there for the colors? No, it's not possible to see everything out once, eh?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
maybe try and shrink the page. It is an Excel spreadsheet, not a PDF,
Yeah.
so it's a bit difficult. So, sorry, through you, Mayor, I will briefly go through the color coding. So this was just sent out to members of council right before this meeting. Staff have had a quick opportunity to review. So the items that are highlighted in green, a reduction to those items would not result in a direct increase, or sorry, a direct decrease to the tax levy in that amount. So there's only 4 of them. The Healthy Aging is a program that was a 3-year program that's fully funded from Council Priorities Reserve Fund. The second item is the Walter Gretzky Golf Course. So any adjustments to revenue and expenses there, it's a rate supported unit and is flowed through balancing their transfer to the reserve. And then the 2 down further again are water, wastewater rate supported units as well. So if those line items were to be reduced, it would reduce the transfer and keep the user rate department whole. So the green ones would not result in a levy reduction if approved. The orange ones we highlighted because there's recommended reductions here that staff have identified already one-time reductions to mitigate the COVID impacts on the 2021 budget. So we knew that Canada Day celebrations were going to be very scaled back for 2021. So Lori Dawn had identified savings in those accounts that we've stripped out and are using to mitigate COVID impacts. The same for the Public Works Administration line below that. That entire $30,000 was given up as a COVID savings to help mitigate overall corporate pressures. The blue line isn't noted here as a one account. It is our colored diesel fuel total. So I have reached out to Fleet, and there's a $5,000 reduction proposed here that a number of the services that purchase that fuel from Fleet are rate supported units such as water and golf. So we wouldn't be able to achieve the full reduction there on the tax levy. And then we just highlighted snow removal as the last one. For 2021 budget, there was a significant increase to snow removal, and I'm not sure if that's leading to the reduction here, but the significant increase is a result of bringing on the John Noble Home Apartments, which is a fully self-sustaining unit. So if we were to go there to find that reduction, that would also not result in a reduction to the overall tax levy. So those are the color coding explanations.
So the 3 that are orange, are they all part of the Canada Day file, or is because of Public Works Administration, and then we have Canada Day celebrations, but it's professional services and then entertainers. So the top 2 are for that file, but is the third one also part of that file?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, it's not. It's just another item that was reduced for COVID. So this was a line item that Public Works Administration looked at, realized they probably wouldn't spend this budget this year because of COVID. And we've taken that entire budget and used it in our COVID account in the corporate financing area to help mitigate COVID pressures on the budget.
Okay, is Lori Dawn on tonight? Or perhaps Brian? I just have a question about Canada Day celebration.
Not sure if Lori Dawn is on or not, but I can probably answer your questions, Councillor Weaver, through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brian. So what type of celebration are we anticipating? Are we going to be virtual, or is there going to be any live events scheduled, or I know a lot of the other big festivals have scrapped this year and they're planning on next year. So I appreciate we do probably want to have some type of event, but how big is it going to be?
Yeah, Lori, yes, to you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Weaver, if I can. In my discussion with Lori Dawn, it will be scaled back with, again, depending on the color code we're in. She was looking at a small crowd and possibly, just if it was 100 outside, that's possible, but she is fully looking at a virtual celebration primarily, which does cost for entertainers and also other things she has to set up as well. So that is still in the plans. We still feel Brantfordians need some sort of celebration for Canada. We skipped it last year, so it's much scaled back, but it's more virtual.
If we're going to be doing something virtual, would we have an opportunity to maybe partner with a neighboring municipality like Hamilton or Burlington, perhaps, and try to land a bigger venue, a bigger act virtually, and then share that cost?
That's a great question. We tried that last year, but as you know, we're a little late to the party. The COVID was upon us, and we were really, by the time Canada Day came, we were too late to the party. We had that direction last year, actually, during the budget meeting, but we couldn't get that agreement with others. Really, the only people that did the big celebration last year was Ottawa, and I know Glenn Brown reached out to them to try to work with and do something in Brantford. That didn't happen. But the short answer to your question, Councillor Weaver, is yes, we could do that. We're just trying to see where we sat in budgets wise, and then we'll start activating something to bring forth for Canada Day.
So if the $20,000 for entertainment was removed from the budget, that would cause issue with any type of celebration then, as far as getting entertainers? Or is there more money and that's just some of it?
As Joelle pointed out, and she'll give you the exact numbers, the money has been taken out of the budget to knowing that we wouldn't be doing a full-scale celebration, but there still is money in there to do the virtual celebration. So your short answer is yes, it would affect the ability to do any celebration on Canada Day if we took this money out of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and just a reminder to council members, we are council. This has been dealt with at a prior committee, so you have 1 5-minute speaking opportunity with every amendment or to an amendment. So from there, I think the next up is Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that item 145101 be removed from the list, seeking a seconder. And then I'd like to talk to it.
So they believe Councillor Weaver is seconding that. And so that is, which one again is that?
145101. So first, I wanted to say, Mr. Mayor and Council, that the Walter Gretzky is one of the few, if not the only, golf course in Southwest Ontario that made a surplus. Most of the others in our area lost considerable amounts of money. So it's a real feat that Mr. Moore has been able to operate the Walter Gretzky at a surplus. The other thing I wanted to add, that whether this gets approved or not makes no difference at all to the budget, the overall city budget. It's purely in the within the golf budget. And I wanted to ask staff, do we know how much surplus is being transferred to reserves from 2020 this year? If that's possible.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Utley, the anticipated transfer to reserve for 2020 is $91,627.
And that's in a COVID year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. One of the other challenges that I think that surplus could be a lot more, and the transfer to reserves could be a lot more, had the Walter Gretzky been able to open its banquet center. So there was a lot of lost revenue there for banquets and dinners and Christmas parties and so on. So I think it's just really truly amazing that that we've been able to make a surplus there this year. I also want to, I appreciate what Councillor McCurry is doing here and his interest in golf, and hope we can get out and play around this year if we're able to. But I just wanted to say that I don't, I can't see the logic in this, to be honest, and that's no slight against Councillor McCurry. We've got a winning formula going at Walter Gretzky, so let's let Jeff do his job, and hopefully this year we'll be able to open the banquet center and make more revenue.
Great, thanks,
Thank you.
Councillor Utley. So I've got two hands raised. I assume it's probably not to this, maybe. I've got Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Martin. I assume what you have is you want to put forward other amendments or deletions. But
Actually, I'd like to speak to this one if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so, but actually Councillor Vanderstel had his hand. The problem is I see the yellow raised hand. So Councillor Vanderstel dropped his. You're next, Councillor Martin, in respect to 145-101.
Thank you. Through you to staff, did the Walter Gretzky Golf Center, did it make payment on the debenture for the clubhouse in 2020?
Through Mr. Chair, there was not debentures issued for the clubhouse construction.
How was that financed?
I will go back and check, but I believe it was through the tax supported capital funding envelope.
Okay. So that wasn't paid for by the golf reserves at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Okay. I'm wondering if we should have a transfer from golf to the city to help alleviate the cost that we put forward for that. And with that in mind, I think the amendment on the floor to take that line out is not appropriate. I think we need to keep that line in and transfer some of that money back to the city. You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
So much for the space bar working. So Councillor McCreary, you're up next to speak to this amendment, followed by Councillor Carpenter.
Mayor, thank you very much. I did want to offer a little clarity. I think maybe what's before us is misunderstood. The 145101 line is giving staff a greater revenue number to achieve, actually, which I think is entirely possible. This will be our first year with one golf course. So one would presume that we should be able to do much better with respect to green fees and flex fees at Gretzky. So I don't think it's unreasonable to want to achieve a greater amount of revenue, which then will stay in the golf world and begin to offset some of their additional costs and some of their future costs. So I think asking them to produce another 15K in revenue is not unreasonable, and I think is quite logical.
Councillor Carpenter to this amendment.
Yes, the staff, how much was the cost of the clubhouse that the taxpayer paid for?
Through Mr. Mayor, we're just getting that information right now.
Okay. All right, then speaking to it, clearly that money came from the tax supported portion of the budget, the capital budget, and the capital budget that could very well have been used to build affordable housing. Just saying, it was available, and we didn't debenture the clubhouse and this expenditure, and now it's got a world-class clubhouse, a new parking lot. It's very nice golf course. The residents don't have a second choice now for a municipal golf course. They only have one. And as Councilor McCreary said, demand will be high to play at this new golf course with the new clubhouse, and the fees probably should go up accordingly, and revenue should go up, and some revenue should go back. And I would suggest any revenue that goes back to pay down the whether it be, my guess is 5 million, but the cost of building the clubhouse, and that money be put into the affordable housing account to build affordable housing. So I agree with this recommendation. There should be no difficulty in collecting more revenue from this new and improved golf course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Seeing no raised hands. Madam Clerk, would you please call the vote then in respect to reducing the revenue from the Walter Gretzky Golf Course? That's the effect of this if you vote yes.
Certainly. So this is an amendment to the
Point
amendment.
point of order, Mayor.
Yeah,
Mayor, a point of order, please.
Yes.
It's not reducing the revenue, okay? What's before us, the amendment before us, which has been separated out, if it stands, would increase the revenue at Gretzky in anticipation of exactly what Councillor Carpenter said, being a much more popular source for golf. It also does not mean we raise the fees. It simply means
Well,
we recognize that we can do a much greater
point
volume.
of order, because what this does is it reduces, it's taking this out. I understand what your intent is originally, but if you vote yes, what in effect what you're doing is you're voting to reduce the revenue allocation by that amount, because you voted to increase it, and I guess this would leave it as it was originally in the budget. So.
That is correct. It would leave it as it is in the budget.
Yeah, correct. If you vote yes, right? Okay, so I think that generated a couple other questions. So, Councillor Wall.
thank you, Mayor Davis. I'm just looking for clarification on what I was voting for. So originally, this was something we were going to do or not do. And then I believe Councillor Utley said, I want to not do this. I want to take this out. So to this vote right now, are we voting to do this or not do it, or are we voting to take it out? Because if it depends.
So my interpretation is that, so what Councillor McCurry, this being in his package, let's call it, of amendments, means he's asking that the revenue allocation for the Walter Gretzky course be increased.
Sorry, I don't think you understood my question, Mr. Mayor. I apologize. My question is, originally, we were going to vote on all of these things one at a time, and we were going to vote to do them or to not do. That was...
No, we have a package that's been presented to us by Councillor McCreary.
And the motion on the table is to take this item out of the package.
Out of the package of amendments or changes that Councillor McCreary has offered.
So if we vote yes, this thing doesn't happen.
Well, if you vote yes, what it means is you're voting to take that out of the package that Councillor McCreary's put on the floor.
Thank you.
Okay. Hope that's clear. Councillor Van Tilburg. Sorry, you're muted, Councillor Van Tilburg.
They hit it on. How do we get to the $445,000 figure?
Question, I believe, for staff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Van Tilburg, that's a combination of green fees and flex fees from the members.
Okay, so what you get, you're going to get no matter what. So you're basically saying you're going to come in around this ballpark one way or the other.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. So we could raise it, we could lower, but you're going to get what you get. And so what you've done is you've given us your best estimate for where you think revenues will be for 2021. Would that be accurate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And this money, one ways or the other, it all goes back to you, to golf operations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, I'll go with what you gave us. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Tanya, would you please call the vote on this amendment of the amendment?
The amendment to the amendment has failed on a recorded vote of 5-6. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Utley, Sless, Van Tilburg, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Vanderstel, McCreary, Martin, Carpenter, and Toski. Councillor Wall.
Okay, Tanya, can you get back up, share its screen, the Councillor McCreary's package for us? Please put on the floor.
Certainly, just bear with us one moment.
All right, I believe Councillor Vanderstel, you wanted to put forward a change to this package.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. There are four that I would like separated, just for a number of different reasons, how they don't necessarily fit into the overall COVID plan. I understand being COVID sensitive on the budget bottom line, but would you like those four numbers now, or would you like me to bring them up as we go?
I think we better do them one at a time.
Okay, the first number is 157,103. Included in that would be the clothing allowance for operational services, I believe. That's the first one.
I'm not sure I see it there. If you look at the shared screen,
I would look for direction from Joelle to find out where that slots into this. Sorry, this most recent version of Councilor McCreary's work.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do recall that that item was included in the document that was originally in the memo that was distributed to members of council this afternoon, which included a much larger list of
That's
accounts that were seeking clarification. Since that time, this much shorter list has come back.
Right. So
clarification.
what line does that fall into?
It's not on this shorter list.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Let me review. I'll get back to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
okay. All right. So could you lower your hand, please? Yeah, okay. Councilor McCreary, are you proposing an amendment to your amendment?
Mayor, if you'll bear with me, I would just clarify that a bigger list was sent to staff last week. They clarified a lot of these items, probably more than half of them, so they're not before us this evening.
So I think what you're telling us is you don't look at the spreadsheet that came to us earlier today. This is the spreadsheet we should use. And in fact, this is your motion that's on the floor, what we see shared in front of us.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So I think next up is Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, I would like to separate the one with small tools, 154,404. Wastewater.
The $2,000 expense reduction, yes. Okay, so is there amendment for that? A seconder, I mean. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you. I just would like to get some information on how this worked with the small tools. I'm assuming that this is paid for through our water rates and that we're just budgeting for small tools. And what kind of tools are these that we're speaking of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Sylvie.
Thank you, Joel. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Sylvie Congera, Director of Environmental Services. The small tools is, yes, it is paid out of the wastewater rate. It is tools that are for the wastewater plant and pumping station maintenance. Some of the example tools could be like a cordless grease gun or a welder and those kind of things.
Right. So if the money's not there and you need the small tools, what do you do? Because you're going to need them. It's small tools.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we needed to keep the process going, we have to purchase it. So we will purchase it, and it'll be a variance in the report that we have to explain later on. So this is the budget is that we can plan ahead and purchase a tool instead of purchasing it in an emergency. That's the reason we do see that some of the older tools need to be replaced for 2021. That's the reason we increased the budget for 2021.
All right. I would imagine, I know what it's that it's very frustrating when your tools are worn out or the wrong tools or you need a tool and not there. This is marginal, so I can't. I would like to see this one removed from the list and voted on separately, please.
That's in effect what we're doing. So you're
Yep.
asking us to vote
Yep.
yes for removal. All right. So it's getting a little.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. It's getting a little confused. I see a lot of raised hands. I'm not sure whether you're raising your hand because you want to put on the floor some other minutes or you want to speak to this. So if you want to speak to this, the small tools, leave your hand up. Don't lower it. Councillor McCreary.
Oh, Mayor, thank you very much. Well, for 2021, staff have proposed a 100% increase in the budget available. The reduction before us today would simply reduce their increase to 60% over last year. And one will note, if you've taken an opportunity to peruse the items, our biggest spend in 2 years was $5,300. So that would allow a budget of $8,000, which is still a significant increase. And I'm sure it's probably going to accommodate any needs that arise.
Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a feeling I'm going to be saying this a lot, but our staff have actually done an excellent job reducing their budgets to the point where it's the lowest we've actually had the city's portion before. So I believe everything that's been taken out of the budget is, it's been reviewed by the staff. I think they've done a great job. So it's pretty tough to support some of these small incremental decreases. Obviously, it's needed, and we all, as a council, we are responsible for our water service. So I'm very cautious about taking anything away from that group, actually, because of those reasons. So I'm hoping all members of council will support Councillor Van Tilburg and I in having this removed from the list.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what people are failing to realize is that if Councillor McCreary's amendment passes, there is still a 60% increase to this line. A 60% increase to a line that has been roughly spent each year. So it's been spent slightly over 5,000. This will still leave 8,000 in that budget line. It's more than enough to cover historical expenses. And if I'd prepared this, I would have gone for a deeper cut myself. So I think the 2,000 is very reasonable, and I hope members of council will leave that in.
You, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. Councillor Martin explained it quite eloquently. Just because this is a new wastewater, it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact the ratepayer. It does. It impacts them on their bill and on their water bill. Water bill is rates. We shouldn't be saying that just because the water bill rates is not the tax rate, that it doesn't impact the ratepayer. It impacts every homeowner. They got to pay that in the water rates. And so we should. I thank Councilor McCreary for looking at the budget deeper, line by line, and shaving things. And as Councilor Martin said, it's a 60% increase. This budget is still too high, and we need to do more to help people during COVID to be able to pay their bills. And the way to do that is to make sure we've done the best job. So I'll be supporting any cut that doesn't impact the ratepayer. It helps the ratepayer, but doesn't impact the services. Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other raised hands to this one. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the vote on removing the suggested change small tools?
Councillor Wall, we're just waiting for your response. Thank you. The amendment to the amendment has failed on a recorded vote of 5-6. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, and Toski Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sless, McCreary, Martin, Carpenter, Councillor Wall.
All right, so far remains unamended. Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I put my hand up at just the right time, and I've got just two matching numbers. First of that is 62670 through you, some questions to staff. is this the line item for landscaping that has to do with the reduction of long grass and weeds around our water retention ponds? Do I have the right one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I believe that is correct.
And what are the risks? Sorry. What a portion part of this budget is responsible for looking after that specific duty, or will it be affected? I guess I'm looking at the risk factor of not removing that growth from our ponds.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So through you, Mr. Mayor, the proposed reduction here is a corporate-wide reduction. So it's actually not targeting a specific account. So we would need to look in there at what the factors saw the largest increase in here for 2021 to try and explain this a little better. So certainly those stormwater pond maintenance activities with the weed cutting was an increase factor for that budget this year, as well as the increase, I believe, for park services for the maintenance of roadside maintenance in the boundary expansion lands as well. So
Okay.
I know that staff, Brian and Salvi, Brian and Salvi are both on here. If you would want to speak to one of them directly about what a reduction to one of those could mean.
No, that's okay. That's sufficient. Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councilor McCreary, are you speaking? You've already spoken to your package. I don't think we have an amendment to your package on the floor.
Oh, my mistake. I thought we had one. Sorry, Mayor.
Yeah. No, I think Councilor Vanderstel was thinking about it, but didn't put it out there. So do we have any other, just stay on top of things here. Councilor Sloss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to understand, was it 561, the Canada Day celebrations? Or I guess it's the one below that would be, well, they're both 561. The 2020 budget was 60,000. The 2021 budget was 75,000. It was a reduction of 15 to take it to 60. Is this taking it down then a further 20? Am I following the bouncing ball?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So these are two very specific accounts within the Canada Day celebrations budget, the entertainers and the professional services. So the professional services line looks like the one that you were referring to, where the 2020 budget was 60,000 and it did increase to 75,000. So an increase of 15,000. So through a staff report in 2020, there was approval to increase the overall Canada Day budget in 2021. So you're seeing some of that impact here with these budgets being increased. And then what's happened is we've identified that because of COVID, this event is not going to happen in its full form in 2021. So there's been $20,000 reduced. There's been $20,000 each in these accounts identified as reductions, which have assisted in mitigating the overall COVID financial impact on the budget for 2021.
So that's not a new decrease this evening then? You're saying you've already done this?
Oh, sorry, actually the 20,000 is what is being proposed to be amended. The sum of these two accounts, what's actually been identified as COVID reduction, is actually over $80,000. So almost a significant portion of these two line items have been identified as having reductions that are now in corporate finance, offsetting the corporation's overall corporate COVID impacts for 2021.
If I can start again, Joelle, what was the total global budget for Canada Day for 2021?
I will need to get that number for you, but I believe it's in the neighborhood of $120,000.
And we've
Lori Dawn's on now.
Okay.
Through the chair, that's correct. You're correct, Joelle. So the 2021 original budget was $127,008.
Okay. And then we decreased that by how much before tonight?
Between, through the chair, sorry. So with, in consideration of not having the grand scale event that our community is used to at Steve Brown Sports Complex, we understand that there, with making modifications to the event, our opportunities to generate revenue on site is going to be impacted, but as well, the scale of the event not setting up the park to the magnitude that we do is going to result in savings. So the budget that was put forward as a in order to mitigate COVID was reduced to $76,983.
So roughly 77,000. Then this evening, there's a proposal to cut that by 40.
I'm sorry, I don't see the spreadsheet up on the screen.
I believe there's
Yes,
two
through
cuts
you,
of 20
Mr.
each.
Chair.
Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So now we're down to a budget. If this was approved, we're down to a budget of 37. Is my math
Through
about?
Yes, that would be correct. So all of the orange ones that are color coded on that chart have already had one-time reductions identified
Right, but
for
no,
2020.
I'm just trying to determine how much money do we have? If this was approved today, how much money do we have left in the budget for Canada Day? I'm just trying to get to that number, and I believe it's 37, but I could be wrong.
Yes,
37?
that is correct.
Okay. I don't know how it works when we're doing virtual and we're trying to buy things, but does 37,000 allow you to do those kind of things that you're trying to do to put on a worthwhile Canada Day virtual show in the city?
Through the chair, we have been communicating with our staff team as well as within our committee. We have a volunteer committee that supports the Canada Day initiatives. We have planning in place for a plan B and even a plan C for Canada Day. We want to program July 1st according to the COVID framework, whatever color code we're in. So it would be extremely difficult to plan Canada Day on a $37,000 budget, particularly if we do go virtual and broadcast a large scale entertainer. One of the things that council should know is we actually retained our entertainment for 2020. And when the event was canceled in 2020, we were able to receive a very gracious offer from our entertainer that allowed us to carry over to the following year, resulting in a deposit that was paid for our headliner entertainer to not be wasted. So we're very hopeful that we can maintain or reschedule our headliners so that we don't lose our deposit. However, and please don't ask me who it is because we really want to save that for
no, that's fine. I just don't know whether your 37,000 would do that. Would that do that or no?
Through the chair, we would not have enough budget to move forward with the entertainment contracts that we have in place.
And how much would we lose? What would we forfeit?
Through the chair, $25,000 in artist guarantees.
Yeah. So Councillor Celeste, I've let you go beyond the fives you were pursuing with some diligence and questions, but you've used your time up unless you want to propose an amendment to the amendment.
Yes, I will, Mr. Mayor, because I think by cutting 20,
okay,
sorry,
so
I will move an amendment that we take this out. Seeking a second.
Let's get can we get the shared screen back up so we know exactly what you're suggesting come out? Okay, so which line items are we talking about, Councillor?
561 and 561. There's two there, both for $20,000. And if I could speak to that, Mr. Mayor,
But do we have a seconder for that?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Councillor Weaver is seconding it. Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, just based on what I just heard, Mr. Mayor, at beginning, I was prepared to leave this in, but if we're going to forfeit $25,000 because we can't afford the balance of the contract, it's kind of a false economy. But so I don't think we're actually saving $40,000. We're actually losing the 25, I guess, for a net savings of 15. So based on that, and based on the fact that I think my sense is that the community would like something to feel good about. And if we can do a virtual Canada Day of a quality that will get people to participate, I think that would be a very good thing. So I would be hopeful that people would take this out and allow the event to go forward with not forfeiting our $25,000 deposit from last year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sluss, for focusing in on that. Councillor Martin to this amendment.
Thank you. Through you to staff. The money that was taken out of this account for COVID, could some of that be put back in if it was needed to cover off the expenses for entertainers if something goes forward?
Through Mr. Chair. Oh, Lori Don's coming on.
Oh, sorry. Through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Martin. That was a great question. The COVID reductions that we did put forward allowed us to maintain the schedule of entertainers. So if the desire of council and the desire of the committee was to move forward with a virtual event, we would have the finances in place to follow through with the contracts that we do have in place.
Okay, that wasn't my question. The money that was taken out for COVID, could some of it be put back in if Canada Day goes forward as a virtual event?
So I think so if I can through you, Mr. Mayor, I think this is a question of finance, how Joelle's done the COVID accounts. It's not really a question about the act. So Joelle,
Exactly.
do you want to answer this question, Joelle?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair. So we've identified a number of COVID pressures across the organization and a number of COVID savings that are helping eliminate those so that there's no impact on the budget. It's difficult to say whether there may or may not be savings as a result of COVID that could then go back to throughout the year to offset deficits in other areas because we're just not sure. Through this estimates process, we've identified a shortfall of revenues corporately of 5.6 million, and we've identified a bunch of savings to help offset that, including some of these Canada Day amounts, which are getting us to a number that we plan to be able to access provincial grant funding to be able to cover the remainder of that. So for a year-long 2021, it's difficult to say at this time whether amounts would be available for this particular purpose.
Okay, and is there some reason why that information wasn't provided to council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it was in the budget package. So within the corporate financing budget and the presentation, there was a summary of the a breakdown of the COVID and how it was being treated within the 2020 budget. Yeah.
No, I'm referring to specifics because some of these numbers mean nothing because there's been changes to them regarding COVID that isn't reflected in the budget.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct that it's not being reflected on this individual line item budget, but within the COVID schedule, it does identify all the sources of the lost revenues as well as where savings across the organization were accounted for to help mitigate that.
And was that included in our package?
Within the corporate financing part of the budget document, there is a COVID schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Weaver to the 146561.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm hoping that the majority of council will support Councillor Sluss and I in having this removed. But in the event that it doesn't, I have a question for staff. Would it then be appropriate if this passes and it's a reduction, that we also have somebody move a $25,000 unmet need to pay for the penalty of the musical acts? Or do we have money someplace for penalties?
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Weaver. I believe that that cost would be incurred to the Canada Day business unit, reflecting a $25,000 cost.
So we were at 37 or something, and then another 25 off of that. So we'd have about $7,000 left to do Canada Day. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, not seeing any other raised hands for this.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
Could you
Councilor.
please just reiterate voting yes to this?
Well,
remove the.
Okay, let's
Just
throw.
for the general public. This is an important vote. So yes, thank you.
So if you can get Joelle, can you put that up again? And can you put the spreadsheet up that we've been working off of? So what Councillor Sluss amendment on the floor to the amendment is it's actually line number 5 and line number 6, which is 146561 Canada Day celebrations. His resolution is if you vote yes, you're voting yes to removing this from the package of amendments Councillor McCurry has presented to us. Okay. All right. So, Madam Clerk.
The amendment to the amendment has carried on a recorded vote of 9-2. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, Carpenter, and Toski, Van Tilburg, Wall. Those opposed, Councillors McCurry and Martin.
Right, Joel, can you share that spreadsheet again, please? So we just removed lines 5 and 6. So it's been amended. Any further adjustments or amendments to this package that Councillor McCurry has put on the floor? Check the adjustments box. Yes, Councillor Weaver.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was just hoping for some clarity. Could we remove everything that we've basically stated that we're not going to support at this point? And I think there were some of these items were not going to affect the budget at all. So are we keeping those items still in, or are they being removed as well?
So I'm ruling that I think that's a good idea, which Joelle, can you do that for us? So 5 and 6, lines 5 and 6 have been removed from this package. Can you like line them out or take them out?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so you've deleted them,
I'm
all right.
squinting to look at the screen here, sorry. So yes, so those items have been removed. Okay. So overall, the expense reductions suggested are 113,000. Keep in mind that includes rate numbers as well, and then revenue increases of 22,000 for an overall, I guess, combination of revenue decreases and expenditure increases of 135. But again, keep in mind, those are not all going to result in tax supported savings as a result of this.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I just want to make sure I can still continue.
Yes, you can. Well, yes, it's been amended. So if you want to speak to the entire package, it's.
I actually have a question about one of the items, if I could.
Okay, so you realize you're using your 1 5-minute speaking opportunity on this package.
It's a doozy, so I think it's worth it.
Okay, go for it.
So it's the advertising total. So we're saying that we're going to remove the advertising budget of $50,000 from the advertising budget. Is that communications budget, or is it a corporate everybody's budget, or how is that divided up, or is it strictly coming out of communications?
All right. So through you, Mr. Mayor, This is a corporate line item, so it would not necessarily be communications. I'm just going to bring up a document that highlights some of the other significant areas within that budget. But this was a budget line that was already reduced through the estimates process by $75,000.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
And when we look at the what's the significant factors that are increasing this budget for 2021. A lot of them are the result of grant programs that we've received and flowing through those dollars through advertising, those provincially funded programs. We also have some federal grant funding that we need to advertise for as well, that's being funded through federal grant programs. So federal grant programs are increasing this budget 21,000. Provincial grants are increasing this budget 23,000. And there was one-time approval of 37,500 for advertising the change to the biweekly yard waste program for 2021 as well. So the increase factors are either one time or are grant funded. And then when we look at the base budget, there was already that $75,000 reduction the other night. So when we do look into what would be left in there, certainly Maria's area within corporate communications would be impacted, as well as, I'm just seeing what the other major budget item is in here.
Probably our
Sanderson
environmental
Center.
assessments and whatnot.
Sanderson Center is one that has advertising dollars, as well as some of the parks and recreation services as well are significant.
Okay. I won't be able to support this one either, Mr. Mayor, so I'd like to move an amendment to have it taken out, and simply because, again, we took out 75,000. I didn't agree with, but the majority
Can
of
you just
council
hang on a
did.
minute? Hang on. Let's first of all, so
I'm seeking a seconder. I apologize.
Yeah, so you're asking that 62235 advertising total 50,000, that this be removed from this package that's on the floor. So do we have a seconder for that? Physically raise your hand if you're second. So Councillor Antosky is seconding that.
So, and then
Right,
if I could just,
it's on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's my opinion that we actually need to do more communication with our constituents, not less. Advertising is basically providing information to people, and we already did lose 75,000 in communications department's budget. I think you just take a look at Facebook or social media in general, and you'll see people don't understand how our city runs. They think that we're in charge of the health unit. They think we're in charge of the hospital and the police. And how do we go about correcting that information? Well, through communications and through advertising and trying to educate some folks. So I think scrapping out and getting rid of our communications budget, because this would be $125,000 that they would be reducing. I just think that it's not a direction we should be going. We have to improve our communication, not lessen it.
Councillor Carpenter to this.
Thanks. Speaking to the amendment only, just the staff. In the original spreadsheet, you show $614,182 as a 2021 budget. Is that after the reduction that we've done during the budget process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it is not. It's prior to the reduction.
Okay, so the 75,000 will be off of that plus this reduction.
Correct.
Thank you.
Hang on. Councillor McCurry, then Councillor Vanderstel.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I don't disagree with Councillor Weaver that we really need to tell our story a lot better and a lot more frequently. I don't think we do enough of that, quite frankly, and you know, we see the consequence of that. However, when you look at this line, I've got to think that if you ask people in the city of Brantford if they thought for us to spend over $500,000 a year on advertising was a fair amount, I think most people would say yes. And you know, what's that amount to? That amounts to the taxes for 200 average families in the city. And you know, when I look at For instance, Mayor, when I look at what we do in the expositor with respect to our public notices and our advertising there, when I look at the content of the adverts, in some cases it's 50% graphics, and I realize you want to catch the eye, but I look at that account alone as being worth probably twice as much as it need be if we were only to publish script and logo. And I think there's money to be had there without losing one bit of information to our citizens. And I would suggest that if councillors are thinking of where we could take that additional money from, that's probably a darn good line item. And I don't know, I think that might be clerk's department advertising. As I said, I just looked at the global account here. But certainly I don't disagree with Councillor Weaver, but I think, if we refocus what we're doing, take this amount out of the budget, let's rethink how we communicate with people. I'm pretty sure we can do a lot better. And as I've said with some of these other cuts, it's not that staff have done a bad job on this budget. They've simply put in what they feel they need. Council, I think, has an opportunity here to decide what those amounts will be and to ask our staff to manage to those budgets and to those budgets alone that we might amend to tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm inclined to agree that most people have access to a computer, a tablet, a smartphone. Most people have access to some sort of Wi-Fi signal somewhere. I believe the nature of advertising has been changing. Simply over the last 18 months, it has changed significantly, where our means of communication is a much cheaper format in which to process information and to share information. I just have a quick question through you to Joelle. The original number was 621,000, reduced by what percentage with this inclusion?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, with the original reduction, in addition to what's being proposed here, that's going to be over a 20% reduction corporately.
20%. Thank you, Joelle. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, we're in a new world in how we advertise, but the fact is that advertising always has a benefit. I've seen the mayor statements on when I'm scouring YouTube, and all of a sudden, a little bottom, click here, and we get to hear what the city of Brantford's up to. So I don't know if we're doing less or we're doing more advertising. Actually, I'd like to get an answer. How have we diverged in our advertising with the new? It's not new, but with electronic media now becoming more dominant than things the way we advertised in the past. What has changed, and are those costs higher, lower, or do we have to do them in a different way? Any information you can give me on how we do advertising would be good, including when we hire people. I believe we advertise for that as well. Is there anybody on staff that could tackle that one?
Yes, hi, good evening. Through the chair, Maria Visaki, Director of Communications and Community Engagement. Thank you for the question, Councillor Van Tilburg. It's a very timely and good question. We have changed, certainly in the last couple of years, our approach to how we spend advertising dollars because technology has changed and because the way people consume information has changed so dramatically. We've even seen that change quite significantly over the past year because of virtual formats of many things that people used to be able to do in person. So you mentioned an example where if you go on YouTube and you're looking up something from the city, that you will see city advertising that comes up at the same time. That's not a coincidence, that's strategic. That's the way that we buy campaigns. When we advertise with the Brantford Expositor, almost always there's a digital component to it as well. So what we'll do is we'll buy like a Google ad package in addition to the print advertising. And if you look up something to do with kids' activities in Brantford through Google, then you will very likely, when those articles come up, also see advertising for the city's Healthy Kids program. And if you click on that ad, it goes right to the webpage on the city's website. So we work very closely with the Brantford Expositor to leverage all of the new digital tools that are available to us. And we also buy YouTube through the Expositor. So it's not just the Expositor, it's a relationship with Post Media in general. And in terms of what our investment level is, should our investment level drop, then our negotiations with the Brantford Expositor and Post Media in general would also need to be revisited, because we get a ton of added value in media because of our spend levels. So while it may look better on a spreadsheet to remove thousands of dollars, that will result in thousands of added value media that the city wouldn't be able to leverage. So I mean, I could provide a more detailed report to council in that, to explain that in more detail. But yes, there's been quite a transformation in terms of the way that we approach advertising. Print is still significant, but it does not have the lion's share of what we spend in advertising. Most of it now is digital.
Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff. The advertising line has been decreasing in the actuals, 19 and 20. Has COVID got anything to do with that? Or I would think that our advertising would have gone up to explain all the changes that have been involved with COVID. Is that because we're using more online and less print?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we look at the details of the advertising, a lot of the object codes did see a decrease because the facilities weren't open and weren't advertising. So you see a lot of savings in 2020 resulting from COVID in the Sanderson Center, as well as our recreation programming as well, because there were no programs to advertise for.
Okay, so some of that decrease is one time then.
Correct.
Okay. And
also, sorry, through the mayor, if I could also add that the all of the advertising that was spent with respect to COVID went to a different business unit. So it was a special business unit that was set up just for education and awareness advertising related to COVID. So it wouldn't show up in any of the departmental business units.
okay, and with 75,000 that's cut already, plus this 50,000, that'd be 125, which is only less than 6,000 more than the increase. So on a $500,000 budget, it's just slightly more than a 1% decrease to this line item. I think staff can live with a 1% decrease considering everything we're going through with COVID. So I won't be supporting the amendment to the amendment.
Councilor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure who to put this to, but we have a statutory obligation on a number of items that we must advertise. Thinking of like planning matters and hearings and those types of things. When we're looking for contracts, RFPs, all of those types of things. Does that still require print media advertising, or can that be done online? We're obligated to do it, but are we obligated to do it in print form?
Through the mayor, my understanding is that if there is a print option in your market locally, that we are obligated to put a print notice in that publication in addition to other methods of advertising. There are communities that do not have a daily paper, or a weekly paper. Thus, they're not obligated to abide by that legislation, but it is my understanding that we still are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I've got a question for staff. I wasn't able to keep track of the numbers and the questions. I was more focusing on who is coming up next to speak, but I want to make sure I understand this. So I'm looking at that line 15, 62235. So the 614,182, the 2021 budget, that's the budget amount presented before that $75,000 adjustment, right? I want to make sure.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So is the impact of that decision, this decision, if it continues, is basically you're bringing this budget back to what it was in the 2020 budget of 495,129, more or less.
If this is approved, the budget will be reduced to 489,182.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So any other speakers to this one? Not seeing any. So, Madam Clerk.
The amendment to the amendment has carried on a recorded vote of 6 to 5. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Utley, Sless, Antosky, Van Tilburg, Wall. Those opposed, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstel, McCreary, Martin, Carpenter.
Joelle, can you bring that, share it up again, please? We now have an adjustment. So you can delete that line 15. Okay. Councillor Wall, you've had your hand up for some time. I think you want to make an adjustment or question. The floor is yours.
This is my only speaking opportunity, so I'm going to take it. I'm going to try to be graceful and elegant like a swan. Watch this. Okay. I support the hard work that's gone into this and the time that we have all put into this. And at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that things are fair for the taxpayers and the people that I represent, because times are tough. So I think I have 3 questions. The first question is, regardless of the budget, if a department of the city needed money for
so Councillor Wall, can I say this?
Sure. I was being elegant like a swan.
I know you were. Yeah, I know you're I think what you want to do is you want to speak to the budget generally, rather than to Councillor McCreary's package.
Oh, you know what? That might be true.
Yeah.
Not
so
as
there'll be an
elegant as I thought.
opportunity once we deal with this and any other potential amendments. Then we'll have a go around for comments, read the budget. Councillor, so I'll definitely have you in the list, and you'll be one of the first for that. Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, I believe I'm speaking on the amendment as amended.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Correct. So you're speaking to your package. It's been amended a couple of times, so it's now we get a fresh go around to speak to the package as a whole.
So what we're speaking to now is the amendment as amended.
Correct.
Yes, thank you very much.
Just a point of order, then, does that mean we all get a second speaking opportunity?
Yeah, that's correct. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, Councillor McCreary, if there's any other amendments to this package, just to kind of clear them up, and then we'll have one final go around on your package, the amendment as it's been amended. So are you okay with that?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So does anybody else have anything further, any other suggested changes, et cetera, to what we have before us on the shared screen? Not seeing any. Okay. We have one go around to speak to this now. Councillor McCurry, you're up.
Actually, I'll move that you call the question on the amendment, Mayor.
Got a seconder on that? Councillor Weaver has seconded that. So I'll call any discussion on that? Seeing no raised hands. So
Through you, Mr. Mayor, before you vote, would you want a total of what this results in as far as tax supported reductions?
yeah, that'd be helpful. It's been a moving target here. Let's see the latest tally, please.
So the remaining reductions, which are the items that are highlighted, they're not highlighted in any color on the screen, total $46,000.
All right. Can you just bring that up, your spreadsheet? Just share it.
Yep, it's coming.
Yep.
Mayor Davis, they're just confirming numbers. They'll move. Just one moment.
Yeah.
There we go. Just having some technical difficulties.
Right. So we see the numbers down there, the 39, the 7,000 increase in revenue for a total of 46. Right. Yeah. So then with this, is there any discussion, any comment on the motion to call the vote? And I'll say one thing. I think I wanted to make one amendment. So I'm going to ask you not to vote in favor of this. Seeing no other raised hands, Madam Clerk, call the vote, please.
Sorry, what we're voting on isn't on the screen, or we're called, I got.
Call the question, it's right there, Councillor Well.
Councillor Wall, just waiting on your response.
I'll vote in the affirmative.
I'll note that. Thank you. The vote to call the question is carried on a recorded vote of 10-1. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, McCurry, Martin, Carpenter, Antosky, Van Tilburg, Wall. Those opposed, Mayor Davis.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the vote on Councillor McCurry's main amending motion that's been amended a couple of times? I guess you could get that back up for us so we know. Yeah. You've all seen that spreadsheet enough now.
Councillor Utley and Councillor Van Tilburg, just waiting for your responses, please.
For whatever reason, it won't let me hit submit.
If you could just
confirm. It just went. We're good.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. The amendment as amended has carried on a recorded vote of 11-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, McCurry, Martin, Carpenter, Antosky, Van Tilburg, Wall, Mayor Davis.
Okay, so the budget motion that Councillor Carpenter put on the floor has been amended twice now. And I think Councillor Antosky, did you have any further amendments? Yes. Okay, Councillor Antosky, because you had your hand up long ago, I think, for that purpose.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's gone from my email as well, so hopefully the clerks can put it back. I lost it when I went out of my screen. It's an amendment to relook at one of the unmet needs, which was one of the clerks' positions. You know, I know that we want to do whatever we can to bring.
Do you have a seconder on that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I do. It's Councillor Utley.
Yes, Councillor Utley's raising his hand. Okay.
Thank you.
We have it up on the screen in front of us. That is the adding in the unmet need for the administrative support clerk services, right? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. We work hard to reduce the budget, and we see, you know, Councillor McCreary's gone line by line there and helped us find some other savings there. But there's things that we have to look at the other end. We received, I think 13 or 14 unmet needs this year, and previously I remember seeing 30 or 40. Our CAO looked at these and came back with far fewer, and this is someone who, you know, is there day to day and is seeing what our staff is dealing with and the levels of work and how thin some of our departments are. And I have seen how thin the clerk's department is. I would guess, and maybe somebody can confirm this, that it's probably either the top or maybe in the top 3 of most overtime run in a department. Probably our CAO has the most overtime, but they're thin, and we keep making new task forces, and we're growing, and we cannot expect, as we grow. I mean, we just took on over almost 3,000 hectares of land, and with that, there's going to be a lot of growth. There's going to be a lot more work, and we can't expect the same number of people to be doing the same amount of work. We need to treat our employees well. We need them to enjoy their job and not feel frustrated at the end of every day because things can't get done. And this is one that I think is really needed. There's others on that list I'd like to address as well, but I guess I'm picking my battles, and this is the one I brought forward as an amendment, and I hope that we can see our way through, because the clerks do an awful lot of work for us as well. And I don't know that there's a single thing that happens in the city, in the corporation, that doesn't have a clerk's hand on it somewhere along the line, and that's a lot to deal with. So I hope I'll get support on this, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Toski. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for the clerk's department. So when this came originally up during the estimates process, I had asked if we could show what the calculation is of the overtime and the amount of money that would be compared to what the amount of money it would cost to actually hire somebody, which would then reduce those overtime hours, hopefully. We did get a memo on that, and I was hoping that, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Tinny, but could you please review that memo with council? This is a reminder, please.
Certainly. So through the chair, so just as a reminder, the administrative support, the unmet need, the total annual cost would be $84,143, being reduced for the 2021 year as we're starting in June. An example of the overtime submitted based on the over 1,200 hours that my area submitted last year would have averaged somewhere in the neighborhood of 66,000 to over 108,000 if that had been paid out.
Okay, thank you for that. And can you just explain what this additional body, if this was to pass, would be doing to assist the clerk's department?
So certainly, so through the chair, this position would actually alleviate some of those pressures from the admin functions that are currently being done by your senior staff members. So as Councillor Antosky noted, there are many things that come through the clerk's office, from communications to agreements to task forces. And so those senior level staff are tasked with ensuring that those procedures are all followed. And on top of that, we're making sure that all the letters and the correspondence and the budget details are matched. And so this administrative role would help to alleviate some of those lower level functions. Not that they're not important, they're very important to be done, but it would alleviate those pressures on senior staff to allow them to commit further to research and procedure and advice to different staff members and participating in organizational benefits.
Okay, thank you for that. So I supported, this is the reason why I supported it the first time. I felt the amount of overtime, although it's not a 1-for-1, it's not going to supply a full FTE for the corporation, but it's just about $20,000 more adds the person. And then that will also reduce the amount of workload for some of our senior management, which I wasn't aware of. That I think that's pretty important to make sure that they're able to do the work that we pay them to do, not do the work of the clerk's department. So thank you, Councillor Antosky, for bringing this forward, and Councillor Utley, I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was asked by Councillor Weaver. I was concerned about the amount of overtime. Thank you.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Tanya, again, not putting you on the spot. Through EOC and a number of other decision-making bodies, we determined that some committees should meet, some should not. Some groups can meet, some cannot, based on the available amount of time that Clerk's Department had to help out with those meetings. Which are the groups or meetings that would normally have received help from the Clerk's Department that today do not?
Sorry, just to clarify, are you looking for which committees are not currently meeting, or which committees are clerked by a different department?
Committees, task forces, community groups, whatever it may be.
Through the chair, so I'll answer the question in two stages. So there are 48 committees, task forces currently that are operated through council and its committees' objectives. There are only a small portion that are clerked by another department, which during the COVID impacts and during this pandemic, clerks has then been added into that operation in order to assist with our virtual expertise. And now we're seeing that our procedural advice may be needed in those committees. So that's another portion that may be able to assist with this. On top of that, we do have direction from council to operate really on emergency or legislative needs for certain committees. So not all have operated this year. We are starting to shift and ensure and try to look at which other ones need to operate. We adjust the best that we can. We pivot, sort of it's an ongoing term in our department that we pivot based on the needs that keep coming down the path. Such as an example is tonight. Tonight was not on the docket a month ago. Now we've pivoted and we've created the ability for tonight to occur. So though that comes with pivoting something else off of the table.
Right. So what we're not serving right now through the Clerk's Department is what? Which groups?
If you'll bear with me, I can open up. I didn't bring that detail with me tonight, but I can certainly pull up our spreadsheet. But maybe Mr. Hutchings there has it at his fingertips.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vanderstel's question. Yes, I think where you're going, this Councillor Vanderstel, is last summer we did cancel most of our task forces, just went to bare minimum meetings during COVID back from March to about September. But we pretty much after September have gone back to almost 100% meetings now being virtual, which is a lot more extensive work on our clerk's department. Doing virtual may seem easier, but it's actually getting delegates and stuff used to Zoom and everything else and making sure they work, their microphone works. So we're almost back to 100%. There is a couple of committees that aren't operating, but most of them are back. All the task force and everything is back up to speed.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian and Tanya. I'll be supporting this as well. I didn't have to spend a whole lot of time with any of the clerks in our department over the last 18 months to realize the amount of stress this full changeover has caused that department, including the increased activity. It's something that is connected to mindfulness. We need to make sure we look after people, especially when they're overloaded for a number of different reasons. And although it isn't a full wash based on the overtime estimations, this is a prudent move in a time where we desperately need the clerk's department in order to keep our communications in line, functioning properly and effectively. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Celeste, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure whether it would be Brian or Tanya, but I think there was 13 unmet needs and they were ranked according to urgency and the severity of the need. Where did this one rank?
Yes, Councillor Celeste, if I can through Mr. Mayor, they were ranked based on risk to both occupational health and safety and to the corporation. This one, I believe, was number 10 of 13. That we had other things that are like fire and things like that rated higher, but this is a workload issue. It's not a risk issue, so I don't know how to explain that. It's not going to cause anybody to get injured or things like that, but it is still a workload issue. That's why I rated lower.
Okay, were there workload issues in rankings that were higher than this, that weren't approved?
There's one in particular. Yes, the leasing coordinator is a workload issue for our real estate department, which is really one person, 1.25 person, which was higher than this, but it was, that was the only one higher, but the other ones were risk-based.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other speakers for this amendment? Seeing no raised hands. Madam Clerk, would you please call the vote on this?
Mine won't work again. Oh, there we go. Okay.
The amendment has carried on a recorded vote of 6-5. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, and Toski Van Tilburg, while those opposed, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sless, McCreary, Martin, Carpenter.
Councillor Toski, any? Is that it?
No, I'm great. Thank you. That's good.
All right, good. Councillor Martin, you're next.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor McCreary, that golf operations transfer $50,000 per year from their reserve to the capital funding envelope in recognition of the new clubhouse being funded through the capital funding envelope. And just speaking to this is a
Yeah. So, Tanya, can you get that? Type that out for us.
Yep, certainly. Just bear with me one moment.
Okay. So go ahead, Councillor Martin, to this amendment.
Yeah, the question was asked earlier. I don't know if there's an answer yet. The cost of the new clubhouse. Were staff looking for that, or is that something that we're going to get at a later time?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The total budget was approximately 4.2 million, with 3.2 million being funded from the capital funding envelope and 1 million from the Shellard Lane Reserve.
Okay, so none of this was funded by the golf reserve. And I think it would have been more appropriate to be funded from there, but obviously there wasn't enough money there. So in recognition of the fact that this was funded from other sources, I think it's only fair that golf return at least a portion of their surplus each year to help offset the expense to the taxpayer to produce this world-class facility. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support the amendment this year. I certainly support doing something like this in 2022. When the clubhouse and the COVID has gone away, the clubhouse is up and running. There's not only the pension that needs to be paid back, but there needs to be money put into reserves for future improvements and equipment and maintenance of the golf course. So there's a lot of unknowns there right now. So I agree that there should be some money set aside in future years, but not this year. Thank you.
Councillor Weaver.
I was going to state basically what Councillor Utley stated. I think it's a great idea. I think it is something that we should look at, but I think it was the first year of operation for the new clubhouse, and it was under specific circumstances that didn't really give them the opportunity to really fully realize their revenue generation. And so I would hate to just arbitrarily pick a number and then have that be, a detriment. So I think it would be appropriate to do this at a later date, but I just think we should let them have a year to see what they're fully going to realize for their revenues. And then I think it definitely is appropriate to do that at a later date. So I won't be supporting that at this point, but I look forward to it coming forward again if it doesn't pass.
Councillor Van Tilburg, you're next.
I'll be supporting the resolution. I think we've shown some surprising numbers in a COVID situation, and I think that'll only get better. We can adjust again next year if that's the case. Just the reverse, but I think that would be a good measure on behalf of what's happened of late, and a good way to show golf operations paying its own way, and that's I think that's very good. So I support the resolution.
Councillor McCurry, you're next.
Mayor, thank you very much. I of course am fully supportive of this, and I'm thankful that Councillor Martin brought this forward tonight. I can appreciate what Councillors Utley and Weaver say about this, and I guess if there are some folks that are on the fence about this, they could amend it to a lower amount for this year. But in the absence of that having come forward, I'll be supporting this amount. I will remind committee that there were a number of us when this golf course was under construction that insisted that that there be a membership levy attached to this construction, as happens elsewhere. But the general manager of the day didn't see fit to incorporate that suggestion into the budget. And so we are where we are, and now we've got a little catch up to play.
Seeing no other raised hands on this one, Madam Clerk, would you please administer? Oh, Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, I think it's only fair, quite frankly, that we took $4.2 million of taxpayers' money, and the Shellers Lane money was taxpayers' money. It was a surplus to the sports park. You know, we could have debentured this whole thing and used that 4.2 million for the much needed affordable housing file that everybody is raving about. You know, a lot of residents in this community lost their golf course, and another group of residents had their golf course improved dramatically with taxpayers' money. And I think the taxpayers, the hullabaloo was all about taxpayers shouldn't support golf, and that was the argument for reducing the other golf course. So, if you believe that, then we need to support this golf course paying its way as well and paying back the money that we use from taxpayers. And I suggest that the money go towards affordable housing, as we've all been saying is needed. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other raised hands, Madam Clerk, would you please administer the vote on this one?
The amendment has carried on a recorded vote of 6 to 5. Those voting in favor, Councillors McCurry, Martin, Carpenter, and Toski, Van Til, Bourgwal. Those opposed, Councillor Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Mayor Davis.
All right. So any other amendments? Not seeing any. Seeing no raised hands. All right. So before we have a go around, this would now be one speaking opportunity, 5 minutes each, in respect to the budget as itself, unless, okay. So can I ask Joelle, if you would please, we've had a couple of changes tonight, a couple of amendments. What do the numbers look like now, that those numbers you regularly gave us through the estimate process, the increases? Are you able to give us the latest running tally?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to verify my numbers very quickly here with my staff. And can I update you in just one moment?
Well, we'll go ahead then, Councillor.
I think we're ready.
Okay, give it to us.
Okay, so the budget currently stands at $167,169,817. That's a budget impact after assessment growth of 2.19%, an average residential tax impact of, oh, sorry, I don't think this is the right sheet. I'm going to need one moment, Mayor. I apologize.
We'll go to the first
We've
speaker.
got some differing numbers here.
All right, we'll do you between the first and second speaker. Councillor Sless, you're up first.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a long process. I think we got through it. I think it every year there's a lot of apprehension because it certainly looking at it from the outside, it looked like it was going to be horrid. COVID just kind of threw a wrench into everything that everybody does, not just the city, but every business, every resident has seen their world change, and municipally our world changed. But I think, in all honesty, doing a city budget really is a balancing act. And it's a case of trying to balance what the public is demanding and needs and offsetting that with their ability to pay for that. And that's a tricky thing to keep in the air. You've got too many balls to try and keep them all in the air, but you try and do your best to balance that need from that ability. And I think I'm part of the group, but I think we did a pretty good job this year, to be quite candid. I know there will be those that it doesn't matter what the budget will turn out to be, they'll vote against it. And I get that. That's what they do, and that's fine. I can respect that. And I expect that because that's what happens. There are others that would vote no matter where it was. I've been on both sides of this, and this one I can support. I think from what we can control, the city budgets, we're under 1%. What we control did extremely well. If you're looking at the total package, where we have problems is in our outside agencies that we don't have financial control over. And that's how we got to where we are. If we had just had to deal with our own city budgets, our staff did yeoman's work. We're below, I believe, inflation. I'm not sure what inflation is, but it can't be as low as what this budget is based on what staff did. And I realize we buy that down with our assessment growth, but we do that every year. So to be consistent, we build in assessment growth. Whether it's right or wrong, it's consistent. So the picture will always look the same and we'll be comparing apples to apples. And having done that, I think we've done very well as a city. And I can tell you, I was on council during the 90s when we had, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 years in a row where we had 0 budget increases. And that's lovely at the time, but at some point you have to pay the fiddler. And things that should have been done during that period weren't done in order to come to a 0 budget. So we had more expensive repairs at the end of that process to try and play catch up on all the things that got neglected while we kept cutting budgets to come in looking good. So I think this, again, the balancing act worked out well in this budget. And I think it's a case of, with what we had to work with and what we're expected to do, I think we found a good balance. So I'm comfortable with this. I know there will be residents that say we can't afford to pay this. I think it worked out to about $1 something, $1.80 or $1.90 a week extra in your taxes on an average house is what it's going to be. Now, I know in some cases that's going to be a strain on them, and I get that, and I apologize for that. But that's where we are. If you want to maintain the city and the standard that people come to expect and a standard that's acceptable, that's the cost of operating a city. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll be pleased to support this. I know there'll be those that say it's not good because it's not 0 or it's not a negative budget, but I think on balance, it's a good budget. So I'll be supporting it, and I hope it passes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Wall, I think, because you had your hand up way back. So I think we go to you next. So.
Sure, thank you. All right, back to what I said before about being graceful like a swan. I wish I was as graceful as Councillor Sless. You put that great, sir. Thank you. Do I support the budget? I guess that's what we're talking about now. Yeah, I support the budget. And here's my reasoning why. We could literally spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours every day, all day, the whole year, trying to find savings. But I don't think that that's what any of us were elected to do. I think that's why we have, and I say this all the time, some of the most talented, brilliant staff in the entire region. They come into work every day, and I don't think anybody comes in with the intention of just spending taxpayer dollars in a frivolous manner. And then they report to their managers and their managers and their managers, and eventually at some point it comes to us. And as everybody knows, the mayor runs the whole city, he makes all the decisions. So at the end of the day, it's all Mayor Davis's responsibility. Sorry, I am taking this seriously. This is hard. It's not easy running a city. And at the end of the day, you know, the whole thing about paying the fiddler is true. Some years taxes go up, some years taxes don't go up, or I'm not an expert in any of this. So at the end of the day, I will support this because I know that in 6 months, if something happens and we need to do something different, that we'll all get together in a room and we'll change the way that we're doing things. We'll change the course. That's the whole idea of having a council. So I have some questions, and I'm going to run out of time. First question, what happens if staff have to pay for something that wasn't in the budget?
Joel, do you want to do that, or go ahead, Joel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this really is a budget. It is estimates. There are sometimes surpluses and deficits that are seen for operational matters that are reported on a regular basis through the Finance Committee. If there's extraordinary needs, typically those are dealt with through a staff report to council, where they'll identify what that extraordinary need is, and staff will usually come forward with a funding source on how that item could be funded. But certainly day-to-day operational items, we do experience surpluses and deficits in those accounts, and we report those through the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Joelle. What happens if staff have to pay for something that was budgeted but was cut from the budget? Like, just to clarify, something we took out of the budget during this budget round. What if suddenly we needed that? Or is it's now it's been cut out of the budget, we can never do it again for all eternity?
I'm not sure if Brian's stepping in or not. So
Councillor, the budget, as Joelle said, is estimates. It gives us direction, operational direction to do things and not do things. If council, overtly takes things out of the budget, staff are not going to try to do those things unless they absolutely have to.
But they could, theoretically, as long as it came back to council. That's
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I appreciate your time, Brian, and I know I'm running out of time. So then that's my last question, was, can any staff member, in whatever process it would take, ask this council to approve something that either was approved or wasn't approved or was cut, if that was necessary?
Councillor, as a last resort, we try to operate and follow council directions. It does go up the chain to management and through my office and through our senior management team. The short answer is it's not. The short answer is yes, they could do that, but no, the possibility of them doing that unless it's absolutely necessary, doing it wouldn't happen.
Brian, thank you very much. My final statement, Mayor Davis, and thank you for indulging me, is that I genuinely believe in my heart of hearts we have worked as hard as we can without literally spending every single day on this budget for the rest of our time on council, and that I trust that staff are going to do their best to spend taxpayer money the best that they can, and that if something comes up and we need to change this, they just said it, unless I'm hearing something different, we can make changes to this. This is, for all intents and purposes, still a rough draft. It's just a draft. So thank you to my fellow councillors, thank you to staff, and thank you to the taxpayer for putting up with us.
Okay, Councillor McCreary, you're next.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, let me start off by giving my thanks to Chair Councillor Carpenter for his gentle guidance and leadership through this process. Well-managed, Councillor, thank you. This is the best budget process I've seen since I came on council back in '03. And there are two primary reasons for that. One of them is named Brian Hutchings and the other is named Joelle Daniels. And they have really done some magic with this budget. And for anyone who looked through the line by lines, you can see the evidence right there, line by line by line. Back in the old days, when these were still chiseled out of rock with a chisel and a hammer, we'd come into budget starting with a couple of page document and about 9 pounds of paper all gathered together. And the direction was, have a go at it, lads and lasses, and we'll see you on the other end. And to further my history lesson, along came John Brown years ago, who was frustrated because Councillor Martin and I and Councillor Carpenter and Councillor Robel would torment the remainder of staff with hours and hours and hours of line by line questions. And John Brown struck a deal with us and said if he could introduce a process, would we follow it? And we still employ that process largely today. But then we fast forward to this period in time, and one looks at what Mr. Hutchings in particular has done with respect to budget guidance. And Mr. Hutchings has instituted something of a culture shift here. So we're not seeing what was evident at one time, which was kind of a hide and seek exercise between council and staff, because there wasn't a high degree of trust around either party at budget time. We've turned the corner on all that, and what you see before us today is the delivery of a budget, which is exactly what this council asked for when it gave its guidance quite some time ago. They've delivered what they were asked to do. So I'm fully appreciative of all the effort that's gone into this. As Councillor Celeste said, some of us don't support the budget year after year because of increases, and I won't throw stones at anybody who does support it, because it's reflective of a heck of a lot of hard work, not just by staff from top to bottom, but by members of this council, the Estimates Committee, and the Finance Committee as well. So, you know, we finish up here tonight with a split vote on this budget, but that doesn't diminish the work that was done, and it doesn't diminish the hard work and dedication of everybody that contributed to this. I will say, however, that that the production of next year's budget will be, it's probably underway already, but I think what we need to do is this council really does need to look at the taxpayer next year. We're going to enjoy a banner year with respect to assessment, and I look forward to us giving direction to staff to commence the 2022 budget with a goal in mind of a 0% increase to the taxpayer after all assessment at outside agencies. So thank you, Mayor. Those are my comments.
Councillor Weaver, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through my day job, I go into hundreds of workplaces and I deal with a lot of the surrounding municipalities, and being able to go in there and talk to those folks, I already had a huge appreciation of what our staff do, but seeing how our staff was able to pivot during a pandemic to really put us in a very successful situation for this budget, really that we owe a great deal of gratitude to, you know, Brian and, you know, senior management team, finance committee and Joelle and all of our staff, because all of our staff really just pivoted on a dime during this whole thing. And the amount of work that they did was amazing. I mean, we had Parks and Rec staff serving food. I mean, people just went where they were asked to go, and they did it with a smile. So really, I want to take this time to thank you. Thanks to staff. The work you did, you really did set us up to be successful this year. You know, obviously it's under Brian's tutelage, so, you know, thank you, Brian, but, you know, it is a team effort every year. And so the rest of staff, thank you very much. You did a fantastic job this year.
Councillor Redler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to recognize Chair Carpenter and the Estimates Committee for this year's estimates process. Secondly, this has been the most challenging year I can recall in my 10+ years on council, with COVID and trying to find millions to build shelters for the homeless in our community. That was money that was not budgeted for, but we found it. Thirdly, I think this budget represents a good balance between the needs of the city and what's affordable. You know, I'd like to see lower taxes, but sometimes challenges come along that are totally unexpected, like COVID, and we have to react to that. And then lastly, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to thank staff for an exceptionally well-organized and presented budget. By far the best, the easiest that I can recall, and obviously a lot of work went into this, very well organized and well executed. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the 75 people in the room, according to Councillor Weaver's calculation, I apologize for any of your time that I took up and what it cost us. For the 25 people watching at home and the further 250 people who will be watching by the end of this week to our deliberations here, some of this will be extremely confusing to figure out what an amendment to amendment to amendment is. But what I am most excited about is the parallels that you can draw from both priority sessions, including KPMG, and what we have in front of us today, as far as what we consider to be priorities and what we acted on. And this has probably been one of the most fruitful overall discussions that I've seen on a multi-level and a very difficult way to communicate. I have to admit to you that Zoom is not my favorite form of communication, but we have managed it through the hard work of our staff, and for which I'm always going to be grateful. The Herculean efforts they went through to make this transition and put us here are beyond compare in my experience. That being said, you may have heard, if you were listening and not talking as much like I have a tendency to do, you may have heard the tendency to talk about stratification, multi-year budgets, and how we can apply our efforts to that model going forward. And coming estimates 2021, 2022, I hope at some point we will be in a position where we can commit to multi-year budgeting so that there isn't so much of a yo-yo. There's a bit more of an attention paid to consistency for the general public. So we have an idea of where we're headed, where we're going to go, and what might be predictable. Taking into consideration what we've just gone through in the last 18 months, I can't guarantee, nobody can guarantee predictability, but it would be nice to see an approach to multi-year budgeting, and I'm looking forward to that process as well. Huge shout out to our staff and to council for working together with staff to compile this, work on it hard, and hopefully approve it in about, I would say, 18 and a half minutes.
Councillor Carpenter, you have the floor now.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Utley and Councillor McCreary for your accolades. I appreciate it very much. You know, all I really did here was manage the budget process through council, and staff did all the work on the budget, of course. As the accolades to Brian and to Joel, of course, were quite appropriate. But I want to say that every member of council, every member of this council was involved in the budget process. Every member of the council asked lots of questions and lots of comments to staff in this budget process. You know, I let this go beyond the 3 minutes because you're pretty much succinct to what you wanted to say in your questions and in your answers. And I think everybody was involved in this budget. And, you know, a budget is a matter of priorities. A budget is council setting its priorities on what's important to council. And you heard some of that tonight. So members of the public that are watching, the amendments that were brought forward by Councillor McCreary and the debate amongst those amendments, that's basically how the budget went. That's the discussion through the budget process generally. It seems tedious at times, but it's very important to have all that discussion. It's important for everybody to understand that and get your point across. And that's how we end up with the budget that we have. We do strive to have a budget process target set without assessment increases first, because the budget itself is a budget. The assessment increase is extra revenue that's attached to it afterwards, and that's fine too. And I think, as Councilor McCreary touched on, you know, this coming year we have a lot of infill high-rise development happening, and that's good tax-paying dollars. It's going to provide us a lot of tax revenue without a lot of increased cost to the municipality, because we already service those roads and those sewers and those water mains that are there. That's just going to be increased assessment. Next year should be a very good year for us as far as revenue goes. And the year after, they're only going to get better with the growth of the new lands. That will provide us with a lot of assessment. The key is how we spend the money as we go forward on that. We need to, of course, work on our infrastructure. Our infrastructure has not been attended to because we've moved that money elsewhere. We need to deal with the infrastructure going forward. This budget, of course, mainly was increased because of policing, and the policing costs were an increase. Now, there isn't anybody in the public that doesn't want to see better policing in a community, with more policing, but they want to see the judicial system work so that the police can do their job as well. The question about multi-year budgets, I already have a notice of motion being drafted with the help of staff. It would be coming forward this month, but it will be coming forward in the April session about a multi-year budgeting process that will be when council does the final 22-year budget or 21-year budget going forward sorry, the 22-year budget in 21 going forward. It'll be the next council that will have to approve that budget, but we would do a 4-year budget process going forward. They would either accept it, the next council, or not accept it, but it would be at least give them a footprint of what a multi-year budget would look like if council approves that amendment or resolution when I bring it to Finance Committee and then through to council if it passes Finance Committee. So I've already been working on that. I wanted to have that done at the end of this budget process. I was hoping to have it done for tonight, but better to have it go through the Finance Committee and get Finance Committee's point of view on it before it comes back through to council. So I want to thank all my council colleagues for all the work that they did on the budget. The in-depth work they did, the work they did on their own at home before the budget meetings being prepared. Many of you were very well prepared when we first came on screen. It is different doing a Zoom budget process. I have 3 screens in front of me, you know, the computer here, and I got the big curved screen to my right and my laptop to my left to make sure I keep track of everything during the budget process. And once you sort of get into the swing of things, it's not so bad. So again, thank everyone for being involved. I appreciate all your work. You did everyone work well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Martin, you've got the floor now.
Thank you. This was a very different budget in a lot of reasons. And one of the things that was different this year was some of the answers we didn't get. Not once did I hear, well, that's the way we've always done it. Not once did I hear, well, that line item is a placeholder. And not once did we hear that, I lost the third one, sorry. But those are some of the things that drove me nuts in years past with the budget. And I appreciate staff not giving any of those answers this time. It's much appreciated. It made the whole process much better and much more enjoyable. This has been one of the best budgets we've done. And I fully expect it's going to pass, even though I myself might not vote for it. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Okay. Well, as mayor, I think I should probably make a few comments myself. But you know, the municipal budget decisions, you think about it, what a profound impact that has on the daily lives of residents. And, you know, from how the city responds to an emergency, such as the ongoing pandemic, or potentially in our area, potential ice jam floods, you know, to providing all those required essential services, such as, you know, garbage collection, water treatment, public transit, you know, the safety of neighborhoods. It's just really, you know, when you sit back and you consider the end of a budget process and you think everything the city does and its partners do, it really is, it's pretty incredible. And to try and budget for that, it's a $250 million corporation, 1,300 employees. It's a lot of responsibility on us and of course staff and our partners. And of course, all through all of that, you know, we have all kinds of pressures on us because, you know, many people believe that we can run deficits, even though we try and say time and time again, as cities, we just can't do that. We're not like the other levels of government. We can just spend money and not worry how we're going to pay for it because we can borrow it. And that is by law. We just do not have that discretion. And so it's a real challenge with municipalities to do responsible budgeting. And I think that's the key. All of us are committed to it, frankly, because we have to by law. We have to commit to balanced budgets. And, you know, the other levels of government, sometimes they commit to it. They may have laws that say they've got to have a balanced budget, but, you know, we're the ones that actually do it year in, year out. And all of that, when we have a lot of mandatory programs the province says we have to provide, we don't really have any discretion whether we do or do not. And, you know, this particular year, many of tonight have commented on it, there were some really unprecedented pressures on us, you know, primarily COVID. And, you know, that put extraordinary pressure on things like, what was it, transit, you know, bylaw enforcement, licensing, provincial offenses court, all the pandemic supplies, PPE. Remember back to the spring, we're scrambling, trying to get it to protect our staff that are at risk. But you know what, I think we should draw a great deal of pride that throughout that, you know, we made a number of adjustments, frankly, on the go, knowing that we were digging a big financial hole for ourselves, trying to deal with pandemic. to laying off, well, let's call it reassigning staff, reducing utility costs, reducing supplies and equipment that weren't related to the pandemic. And I thought we did it. We made a pretty good start on it. But let's admit, we would have started this year from a deep financial hole if the provincial and federal governments had not provided us the safe restart funding. So, many thanks to upper levels of government. They've been actually quite fair with us in that sense. And so, this year, the beginning of the estimates process, we think back, the first meeting chaired by Councillor Carpenter, I think we were at, 2.68%. And so the last 2 months, there have been all kinds of direction, ideas, brainstorming by each of us, senior city staff, middle management staff, to find whatever additional savings we can find, because we know this year some taxpayers are in a tough spot. But we also know at the same time we got to provide essential services. I got to thank, some of our fellow councillors going that extra mile. Councillor McCreary going through the 7,500 lines of the line by line and finding some savings for us, some of which we accepted tonight, some of which we didn't. But there was a lot of effort that Councillor McCreary put into that. And so we now have brought it down to 2.19%. And, I think as Councillor Celeste said, that's a great achievement, because for the city portion that we can control, it's actually less than 1%. Unfortunately, we have a couple of partners, the John Noble Home, the health unit, really severely impacted by COVID, and that's understandable. That's had an impact on their budget. And then, of course, police services, which is the major factor in this 2.19% increase. But, that's not them spending money irresponsibly. It's them dealing with the changed nature of crime in our community and rising crime, but with the services trying to be innovative in how they deliver those services. And I think we'll see more innovation to come. So all things considered, I'm very proud of how our staff, how ourselves, and how our partners have, in a year full of challenges that we've never seen before and probably won't see again. Through it all, we still had to carry on the normal business. And one of the pieces of normal business is doing a budget in the most unprecedented times. And so I think kudos to all of us for this effort. I'm quite satisfied with what we have. Ideally, yes, it would be great if it could be less than 2%, but there were just so many pressures out there that we did our best. And of course, we had stakeholders, partners that were dealing with their own pressures that we could not control. So I'm quite obviously I'll vote for this budget. And lastly, yes, to Mr. Hutchings and Joelle, I second and third and fourth the comments made previously. They have made the budget process much more understandable for us. They don't play the game with councillors that in some municipalities happens, where they bring in a budget at 5%, knowing councillors are going to go through the line by line. And as Councillor McCurry said, take out the chisel and the hammer. They asked us for where we wanted the budget to be, and they pretty much got there again in an unbelievable year. So kudos to them. Any other speakers? If not.
Did we get the numbers, sir?
Yep, we did. Can we have a reconfirming of the numbers, please, Joelle?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the final 2021 operating budget is $167,169,817. That's a budget impact after assessment growth of 2.19%, an average residential tax impact of 2.77%, or $90.88, an average multi-residential tax impact of 2.5%, an average commercial tax impact of 0.59%, and an average industrial tax impact of 1.59%. And just to confirm, there's been some council members that were also wanting the number of just this portion of the budget the city had control over, and the increase there ended at 0.78%.
That was a 0.9 earlier, so that's great. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please administer the vote?
Item 6.1.1 being the approval of the 2020 operating budget and other recommendations and direction provided during the 2021 operating budget process as amended has carried on a recorded vote of 8-3. Those voting in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, and Toski Van Tilborg, Wall, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councilors McCreary, Martin, Carpenter.
All right, so we still have some business tonight. Before we move to bylaws to confirm what we've done tonight, we do have a motion to adopt the minutes listed in the agenda, being the minutes from the Estimates Committee. I believe, Councillor Martin, you've got that motion. Would you please read it, please, and state your seconder?
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor McCreary, that the Estimates Committee meetings be adopted.
That would be for the minutes of February 17th, the 24th, March 1st, March 3rd, and March 8th. So does anybody have any errors and omissions in those minutes? Yes, Councillor Weaver.
Should that not be the estimates operational? Just so we're clear, it's not capital, it's operational that we're.
Yes, correct. That is, well, there were a series of estimates meetings, I guess, beginning with capital, but you're quite correct. This is operating. Okay. All right, seeing no further hands for errors and omissions. Madam Clerk, if you please take the vote on this.
All minutes have been approved on a vote of 11-0. Those voting in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Carpenter, and Toski Van Tilburg, Wall, Mayor Davis.
All right, so we'll move into the final portion of our meeting, which is bylaws. Before we get into that, Madam Clerk, could you please confirm there's two bylaws that we have in front of us, 52-221, which is about confirming the fees and charges to be collected based on the budget. And then, of course, the bylaw to confirm proceedings. Were any of the changes tonight, did they change potentially the bylaw 52-2021? Sorry, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was just confirming with Joelle actually across the room. Through the mayor, I just one second. She's putting her camera on. Perfect.
Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so tonight we have before us two bylaws. One is the bylaw 52-2021, which is to fix fees and charges to be collected by the City of Brantford, and that's based on an Estimates Committee report. And then, of course, we have 53-2021, which is to confirm the proceedings of tonight's meeting. Mm-hmm. And we can certainly pass 53-2021, but I'm wondering, was there anything that happened tonight that is going to cause you to amend bylaw 52-2021 before it's before us, from what you'd prepared earlier in the day?
No, there's been no change tonight that would impact what's in that bylaw.
Very good. Okay. So, Councillor Weaver, could you then move the motion for first and second reading of the bylaws? So you have to unmute yourself, Councillor Weaver.
Yes, when the screen changed, Mr. Mayor, my mute button disappeared. Sorry. Moved by myself, seeking a seconder, that leave be given in the mover and seconder to introduce the following bylaws for first and second reading. 52-2021, bylaw to fix fees and charges to be collected by the Corporation of the City of Brantford for the 2021 Estimates Committee report number 2021-0308, and 53-2121, bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford with respect to the special meeting held today on March 16th, 2021. And a seconder is still seeking a seconder.
I believe Councillor Vanderstel is seconding that. Does anybody wish either one of these two bylaws separated for discussion purposes? Seeing no raised hands, Madam Clerk, if you would please take the vote on first and second reading.
Councillor Wall, just waiting your response. Thank you. First and second reading of bylaws is carried on a recorded vote of 9-2. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, Martin, and Toski, Van Tilburg, Wall, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillors McCurry, Carpenter.
Right, let's go on to third reading then. Councillor Sless, I think you've got that motion.
I do, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, I presume, Councillor Utley, that bylaws 52 and 53-2021 be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and signed by the mayor and clerk.
And Councillor Utley did raise his hand to confirm he is seconding it. Does anybody wish the bylaws separated for discussion purposes at third reading? Seeing no raised hands, Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote on third reading?
The third reading of all bylaws has carried on a recorded vote of 9-2. Those voting in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstel, Utley, Sless, Martin, and Toski, Van Tilburg, Wall, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor McCurry, Carpenter.
So I can confirm that in compliance with my obligations in the Municipal Act, I did actually sign the two bylaws during third reading, assuming it would pass. So I've done my bit. But that brings to an end our special council meeting. We'll be reconvening tomorrow night as Committee of the Whole to receive a report regarding the Composition Council. Till then, have a good night.